You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and I can't think of a better way to kick this podcast off than having a candid conversation with a great friend, partner, supporter of the network over in Michael Zakkour, founder of 5 New Digital. We're going to have a great conversation today with Michael around the new retail renaissance, e-commerce versus digital commerce, how we look at platforms and the ecosystems and habitats that they operate in, and probably even dabble into a little bit of QR codes in the metaverse as a whole. And with that, I want to kind of kick it off. Michael, if you want to jump in with a brief intro on yourself and the company, that would be awesome.
Well, first, thank you, Aaron. It's an honor to be on with you today. I really appreciate it. So I'm the founder and managing director of a company called 5 New Digital. Essentially, we are a digital and retail consultancy. We work with everyone from startups to Fortune 100 brands to help them shape their digital strategy, their digital commerce strategy, their retail and consumer pathways strategies. And, it's just worth noting that, we separate digital commerce, the term digital commerce, and e-commerce. When we're talking about digital commerce, we're really talking about how we help brands, retailers, CPGs to apply digital tools, technologies, IT, and data science across the entire enterprise. Whereas e-commerce is we're dealing with a number of habitats that, as we all know, are the ideal place digitally to buy and sell online. We also work with companies from around the world on their new retail strategy, essentially helping them navigate the growing importance of ecosystems, and how do you look at maybe 15 or 16 of the largest ecosystems in the world, and having a strategy for them, and as well as building your own ecosystem, which really, essentially, to put it simply, is how do you better integrate online, offline technology, supply chain, and media to create ubiquity and customer centricity. So that's essentially who we are. We're located here in New Jersey. We have offices in Chicago, Portland, Raleigh, Columbia, South Carolina, London, England, Shanghai in China, as well as Hong Kong.
Awesome. So, as you noted, you kind of sit at the forefront of what's going on. But what do you see happening in the space today? What should brands be focusing on? What's most relevant that you see, changing on the landscape that people need to figure out?
Yeah, I think this is an inflection point. It was an inflection point that was building prior to COVID, and it certainly accelerated since COVID. And so I think, if you're sitting there as a brand, as a retailer, as a CPG, you're really faced with a game-changing moment. If we look at the history of retail, roughly every 50 or 60 years, there's a major change in the industry. We can go back to the rise of department stores at the turn of the 20th century, the rise of big box stores like Walmart in the 60s, specialty big box like Best Buy, and then obviously, the introduction of e-commerce in the mid to late 90s and everything that's happened since then. And so I think we're at that inflection point again. The good news is it's my firm belief that we are in a retail renaissance. There are more places to buy more things in more ways than at any time in human history. I think that's takeaway number one. Also in this retail renaissance, takeaway number two is that in the battle between the bricks and the clicks, the winner was nobody. The winner was integration. And as you know, that's something we've been working on for 6-7 years with our clients. So how to best integrate your online, offline technology, supply chain, and media to build your own ecosystem and to best engage with those other major ecosystems. And then finally, I think we're at a turning point. We hear the terms a lot: metaverse, NFT, blockchain, Web3. All of those things are in play right now. They're real. It's not a pipe dream. And so navigating that. And then finally, number four, is the importance of brands and retailers testing and learning through some of these new platforms for selling, and certainly through the new technologies. So whether it's live stream, QR codes, social commerce. So I think that's the big takeaway here, is that it's a real inflection point. And brands and retailers and CPGs, in our experience, are really faced with existential questions about how to move forward into the universe of the next 10, 20 years with, digital powering everything.
So I want to jump into just a little bit, because you mentioned retail renaissance. Like, what exactly do you mean by that? And is it on the brand side? Is it on the retailer side? Is it on the customer side? Is it a combination of all?
I think it's a combination.
Here's a thought that comes up too, just really quick, is this idea of, and we've chatted about this before, the spoil me now customer, right? And anyways, I'll kick it over to you, but I would love to hear your thoughts on the retail renaissance so we can break those apart.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to your point there, the quote, I threw out there often is, there's now only one overriding consumer demand, and that's spoil me or else. Spoil me or else I will find the brand, the retailer, the website, the ecosystem that will spoil me. And that's why we keep coming back to that term, consumer centricity. I think there's more talk in the industry about consumer centricity than there's action at this point. But that's really the key. So this renaissance, what I think the big mistake was, in the previous 10 years, in the media, in the industry, people were writing off retail as, dead in the water. And the problem with that was they were using the terms retail and store interchangeably. There was a store apocalypse, right? A physical store apocalypse over the last 10 years, where certainly tens of thousands of physical storefronts did close. Many of the big traditional middle market retailers, whether it's JCPenney or Sears, saw their embers, close out and faded into history. But the key distinction there is, while that was happening, that retail became ubiquitous. I mean, whether it's pop-up stores, whether it's swiping your credit card in the back of an Uber to buy some shoelaces and snacks when you're on the road. And there's been this just reinvigoration of the industry, and it's largely been powered by that integration of online and offline. So
something that comes to mind there, though, is omnichannel as a whole. It's a term, again, that's been thrown around a ton, right? Omnichannel, where hey, we have to have an omnichannel strategy. We have to have an omnichannel strategy. What do you think about when you hear, brands bring up omnichannel strategy?
Listen, it's been an industry standard term for the last few years, where I think it falls short. It falls short in a few ways. Number one, I think what people, when they're talking about it in general, what they mean is people who used to only have physical stores now added a website. Or in the case of D2Cs who are only selling direct to consumer, now they've gotten into wholesale and placing themselves in third-party retail. So I think at its basic essence, omnichannel is digital players going into physical and physical players going into digital, right? That's one limitation. I think the second limitation is it doesn't recognize the importance of the integration of all the elements we've been talking about. It's one thing to have several channels, wholesale, retail, digital, but how you integrate them is the real trick, right? And so we talk about unified commerce. It's the evolutionary next step of what people call omnichannel today. Omnichannel leaves you short where you're just deciding to enter a new channel, or you're taking more seriously, some need to how to game plan for both is on an integrated way. But really, it's about unified commerce. Every brand, every retailer should simply be saying, how do we do more commerce? How do we sell more? Okay. And part of that is, taking the walls between online and offline. And, just to finish this way, look at it this way. The lines between who is a retailer, who's a wholesaler, who's a technology company, who's a supply chain company used to be pretty thick lines. today, the most successful companies are all of those things. So if you look at a Nike or an Apple or an Amazon or an Alibaba, they're all of those things. They're retailers, they're wholesalers, they're technology companies, they're cloud companies. And so that to me is really how you move from just omnichannel into a much more sophisticated and complex strategy of unified commerce.
Yeah, I love it, because from the standpoint of like omnichannel, a lot of people look at I'm selling online and I have a direct to consumer store and I'm selling through retailers, right? And you're right, on the back end, that's not connected, but at this point in time, it needs to be, right? I have this, in the conversation I've had, it seems like these three phases. One is digital, like 1.0. It's just, hey, we've got a website. And then COVID hits and it's 2.0, which then everybody Googles the digital checklist, right? And they get all the different things they need to be doing and all the different integrations they need to have. And they're doing the checklist. And now we're at a point in time where the leaders in the space are actually going through and saying, okay, what is the interconnectivity on the back end? How do we know when a customer shows up, and can on our direct consumer site, are they on mobile? Are they on desktop? Are they interacting with us on, via text? Are they calling in? Are they visiting the website? Do they have feedback, ratings, review? Who is that, customer, holistic view, and where are they shopping? Right? Because at the end of the day, we want to capture the sale and grow the brand. Do we really care if they bought it on a direct to consumer site, on the mobile app, in a retail outlet? I'm not sure. I mean, I know, digitally native brands have a really heavy focus on that, but not necessarily. But you have to be connecting the dots on the back end, which is, I think, kind of what you're getting with this unified commerce thing is, how is it holistically connected?
Well, yeah. So, that's key, how you connect on the back end. So what we work with our clients on is getting them to understand what we call the two enablers, right? The two enablers that allow you to do all of the things you've talked about, which is, follow and create new consumer journeys, lower your cost of consumer acquisition, lower your cost of logistics. And those enablers are on one side, all things related to IT, data science, digital, right? How do we use technology for analog ends? And that's a really important point here, right? Digital should be looked at, and digital tools, as a means to an end, right? And the end is, how do you solve analog real world problems? How do you become consumer centric and really take care of your consumers? How do you ensure that you're going to keep your premier shelf space in a Walmart or a Target? How do you ensure your P&L looks good every quarter, but you're also taking care of what you're going to look like in 5 years? How do you make sure that your employees are well taken care of, right? And so the whole enterprise, right? Those are the analog ends that digital means should be working towards. On the other side, the other great enabler is all things operations, supply chain, logistics, and fulfillment. This is something that, we in our shop have known for 10 years. Which is that the role of logistics in this digital era was moving from, a task to actually being your competitive advantage, to being your profit center. Or if you don't handle it right, it could be your competitive disadvantage and a huge revenue suck. So really getting those two enablers right, tech and logistics, those are the starting points. And then that's how you move into a more unified commerce approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Logistics, customer centricity. People wonder why Amazon just grows year over year over year. That's what they're focused on. And now, regardless on the brand side, who has this, there's often some turmoil between, having a vendor manager or not, or, annual vendor negotiations. Is it going up? Is freight allowance going up? What's happening with your marketing allowance, and how much paid media are you doing? But on the customer side, it's logistics, it's supply chain, it's giving the customer what they want as quickly as they want it over and over again. But you mentioned something interesting, which was customer acquisition cost. Because, at this point in time, all of it's gone through the roof, right? And, brands are looking at, hey, how do I control that? And then there's the other side of, once I have somebody on my site, like, how do I increase lifetime value as a whole, right? How do I increase the shopping cart side? But customer acquisition cost. Would love to hear, thoughts there, because you mentioned something about lowering that. Is that something that's coming up routinely with?
Constantly. It's, if it's not the starting point, it's certainly in the top 3 of conversation starters with brands and retailers that we talk to. Look, it's no secret that, I think the only thing that inflation is risen faster on than a college education is the cost of digital marketing and advertising. If we go back 10 years ago, the great breakthrough for a lot of D2C brands was a playbook that was pretty simple. Content marketing, right, coupled with pennies on the dollar digital advertising and marketing, plus cut out the middleman equals massive growth quickly, right? That playbook is no longer in play because of the cost of consumer acquisition. And I think the other thing that's complicated matters is the sheer number of sites and marketplaces and places you need to advertise is overwhelming. So now what happens, you couple that with the rise of retail media, and all of the privacy changes that have come through the new Apple operating system, et cetera, et cetera. And so what you're left with is a more expensive, more confusing, and lower ROI approach to customer acquisition. Huge problem, right? We could probably spend an hour just talking about the role that retail media plays now and is going to play in the future in complicating things further. So what we talk about with our clients is, let's take ourselves back to 10 years ago and say, you know what, the principles of D2C marketing or growth are still pretty solid, right? Content marketing, solid, but you need to do it in a different way. And then also looking for new outlets to market for pennies on the dollar, right? So if you can kind of carry that forward. So what does that mean? How do I use QR codes and social commerce? How do I use platforms like Netflix and Twitch to reach consumers? So, the analog problem remains, how do I get somebody in? How do I please them? And how do I, get lifetime value by building a good relationship with them? So the answer for us is looking for those platforms and technologies that are going to allow you to test and learn quickly, to lower your cost, and most importantly, make sure that is baked into and partnered with your logistics strategy.
Yeah. So I want to pull just on a string there, which is testing and learning, because I believe, that, almost the scientific method, right? So way back, right, in the day, I was a chemist, and over and over again, it was a scientific method. But it's a little bit different, but it's not so much different than what happens in e-commerce, right? A lot of people they think that, hey, I'm just going to, randomly test and throw stuff up at the wall and seeing what sticks. But those that do it right, they're actually picking what they're going to throw up against a specific wall they're going to throw it up against. And then they're going to analyze what stuck and what didn't, and then make a new decision over and over again. And I believe that the companies that can do that faster than anybody else, in multiple ways, from, identifying the right search terms and SEO and, performance marketing, to the right content, the right imagery, the right influencers or, affiliates or whoever you're aligning with, whoever can test and learn the fastest is just going to have such an advantage over everybody else. We'd love to hear, your thoughts on that testing and learning space.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And what's interesting to me in that space is who is doing well in that rapid test and learn. It's at the top, luxury brands and retailers. One of the most fascinating developments of the last 4 years, and me, I work with, a ton of luxury companies, was, literally 4 years ago, as recently as 4 years ago, I couldn't get luxury companies to unpinch their nose at the smell of the internet. For all the typical reasons: brand integrity, price integrity, exclusivity. Aside from throwing some banner ads up in Vogue, we're not internet companies, right? And you fast forward to 4 years later, and some of the most innovative, exciting testing and learning and innovation in the industry is coming from the luxury companies. I mean, they've come 180, right? There's a thing called the internet to, building the Gucci garden in 4 years. And so you're really seeing at the very top luxury companies playing the test and learn game very well. And they're willing to, really take the long-term outlook. On the other end of the spectrum.
And really quick, the Gucci garden, sure, just for people that may not know.
Oh, sure. Gucci Garden is a proto-metaverse virtual space that Gucci has set up. If you can imagine a little bit like Second Life, sorry if that's a lazy analogy, but it's a virtual environment where, super fans of Gucci can go in and, have tea and shop, and it's social. It's a very social and it's experience based. And the reason it's important because Gucci is not looking at the Gucci Garden is a place that has to generate revenue in the next 2 quarters. It's part of a bigger plan to integrate into a unified commerce strategy.
Awesome. All right, cool. Yeah.
And then on the other end, you're looking at, mass market brands who are experimenting and testing. I mean, it's amazing if you look at just in the last year, everyone from Burger King and McDonald's to Arby's, Bounty, they're all experimenting with NFTs, and they're all throwing QR codes up on their packaging and on their TV commercials. So the middle market has been a little slower to adapt to those changes, but just from the top and the bottom, we're seeing those are the companies that are willing to invest in the time and the energy and the risk to try out these new platforms and technologies and with a long-term view.
So really, you mentioned QR codes. I know they're really taking off right now. Why aren't more people using QR codes? It just blows my mind at this point in time. They're so easy to use. Coming out of the pandemic, who hasn't sat down at a restaurant and just scanned the menu, right? Nobody wants to, type in an entire URL anymore. What's your take on QR codes? Like, why aren't more people using them? How beneficial are they?
Amazing numbers. In 2022, it's expected that 85 million Americans will scan a QR code. So we're talking, close to 28% of the U.S. population will scan a QR code. That's up about 12% from 2021, and it's up 60% from 2020. So that is, if you look at it from a technology adoption point of view, one of the fastest adopted technologies in history. If we look at the adoption of radio and TV and the internet, pretty incredible numbers. I think the reason more people are using them is because brands are getting better at giving them a good reason to use it. Right. And, the QR code is very simple. I mean, an 8-year-old could sit down at their computer and go to a QR code generator site and pop out a bunch of QR codes. They're not difficult to make. And then they're easy to apply. I mean, you can put them on, a bus stop ad. You can put them on a TV commercial. You can put them in a magazine. You can put them virtually anywhere, right? A digital or physical surface. So again, that makes them, easy to generate and easy to place in a number of ways. But the hard part is having a cohesive strategy about what you want that QR code to do and be. But again, it's the flexibility of what you can do with a QR code that's where the brilliance comes from. So it can be used for CRM. It can be used for couponing, special offers, special sites, different landing pages. It can be purely experiential. It can be informative. So again, we talk about where did D2C come from 10 years ago, right? Here's where we see the link up. Content marketing with ubiquitous digital and cheap ad spaces, QR codes fit the bill in all of that. And so, by now the history of QR code is pretty well known. It was a technology that was developed for Japanese automakers to keep track of the parts in their factories. And then it died, and then it was given new life in the mid 2000s in China, and it's become the glue of Chinese commerce. There's no surface in China that doesn't have a QR code on it. I mean, I remember a few years back walking down a street in Shanghai, and there was a busker playing guitar, and instead of a hat out, he had a QR code clipped to the edge of his guitar arm. And so if you wanted to throw him a couple RMB, all you had to do was scan his QR code. At that point, I realized, ubiquity might actually be an understatement. So from a U.S. point of view, again, if you're looking for a great way to do content marketing at a lower cost and control your consumer acquisition, what better avenue than there is for QR codes?
You see live streaming jumping into this space as well. We've talked about this for probably 18 months now, but it really seems to start taking off. It kind of reminds me of what took place with QR codes. Where are we at today with live streaming? Should people have it, in part of their, strategy going forward? What is it going to look like a year from now? I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
So live streaming has grown rapidly in the U.S. over the last 2 years. Maybe not quite as rapidly as a QR code, because obviously the production and distribution is a little more complicated than a QR code. But nonetheless, we went from virtually zero use of live streaming in the US 3 years ago to every major technology company, every major marketplace, everybody's got a live stream space set up. And so Amazon, Walmart, can you imagine if we had a conversation 6 years ago, you and I talking about Walmart and their live streaming capabilities in their marketplace and, having their own delivery trucks and right. So basically, there are three ways for brands to think about and participate in live streaming. The first one is, as I mentioned, the big technology platforms and companies all of them have a function now for live streaming. So you can choose to engage that way. Another way, to me, what I think is very interesting is the rise of dedicated startups, websites that were built for live streaming. So there's one called Pop Shop Live. There's a number of them out there. And their entire purpose is it's like buying a cable TV package and being able to go to the sports channel or the rodeo channel, and you've 24/7 celebrity driven, in some cases, live streaming, and you can participate that way. And then third, the technology is out there now to make it very, very easy to put live streaming up on your website and then be able to stream into Twitter or YouTube simultaneously to make sure you're reaching a broad audience. So, I think live streaming has a huge future in the U.S. It's already, a $20 billion industry, which is a pretty big industry to fly under the radar the way it has. But I think, again, live streaming, social commerce, and QR codes come right back to what we're talking about in terms of the enablers and lowering CAC. Thank
you for being such a great friend, partner, supporter of the network across the board. Really appreciate your insights and your willingness to share all of your experiences with our listeners today. And just a reminder, we're going to follow this podcast up with one on NFTs and the metaverse with Michael here. Again, thanks again for your time today. I'm Aaron Conant. Thanks for joining us and look forward to continuing our digital journey together. Everybody have a great day.